That's all good. That's all good. So, well, I guess I'll start, and I'll just say, first of all, welcome everyone. My name's Chris Gibbons. I work with Smartbox Assistive Technology, and my colleague Melanie, who you'll meet in just a second, is joining us today. Melanie and I are both speech-language pathologists. We've had careers that have spanned throughout assistive technology and working in rehab and outpatient and with kids and adults, and really looking deeply into what works for people who have more opportunity in life because they're using assistive technology. And both of us were drawn to work with Smartbox because there's an ethos at this company, which is a company that develops software. And we're going to talk a lot about the software here in a few minutes, but it's AAC software. And we also make tools that software rides on, which are computers that we build for that purpose, for AAC. But we were drawn to Smartbox because of this ethos of really trying to push the limits of what technology allows people to do and how it allows people to participate in the world, having seen the benefit of that clinically over the years, and because it gives us the chance to express what we've learned clinically and inject that into all of the different ways that the software continues to develop and the tools around it continue to develop. So that's kind of where we come from. Melanie, I'll let you kind of introduce yourself just a tiny bit, maybe when we switched or as we switch topics, but sure. I'm going to give a tiny little introduction to Smartbox and then we'll dive into Grid. Grid is the AAC software that we make, and it's what it gets used a lot with people who are diagnosed with Rett syndrome. So that's what we're here to talk about today. I'm going to share my screen. We're going to do this frequently today.
I will need the screen sharing enabled.
Oh, gotcha. We'll wait for that.
Should be good.
Are we good?
Yep.
We're good now. All right, very good. So I don't know, Melanie, actually, why don't you say hello, I guess.
Oh, sure.
We'll get that out of the way. Hi.
Well, hi, I'm Melanie Gylling, and I am in Minnesota, and I've been working with Smartbox for just a little over a year now, but worked in, as Chris alluded to, pediatric outpatient rehab for about 9 years before that, but also had some experience working with adults and in schools and different things like that. But I super love working for Smartbox. It's been such a fun ride so far. And I'm just excited to be here with you all today. So.
Very good. Well, maybe since you can share your screen now, Melanie, if you share it, we have a couple slides of just what Smartbox is kind of about and the things we build to create context for the software. And then we're going to dive into the software and talk about Grid. And by the way, it's Grid 3. And the reason it's called Grid 3 is because years ago, when we first started developing software, and by the way, Smartbox is located in England, and the gentleman who started the company, named Paul Hawes, had taught himself to code, and he and his son put this software together, and they sort of cheekily called it Windbag, which I still like as a name for software about talking. Windbag, right? That would be for me, right, Melanie? But it became Grid because we so typically, and we've learned this through developmental psychology, through clinical practice, and through what we know about cognitive psychology, which informs all of our software design, about how people organize information and what looks easy to use for people. And that's this kind of grid format. It's why we so often see AAC developed in the kind of that grid format. So there's Grid 1, there's Grid 2, and now there's Grid 3, and that's why it's called Grid 3 for Windows. And then there's Grid for iPad. And we'll talk a little bit about both today. But okay, so what does it ride on? We do this software, but we also have communication devices. So if you move to a screen, I'll show what some of these are. So again, we have devices that are Windows-based, like the touchpad on the left side of the screen, which is a small 10-inch, very portable communication system, but full Windows. And there's things that you can do with Windows that are not as easy to do with iOS or on an iPad. And so we provide both because different people benefit from using both those different platforms. So then there's the TalkPads, which are iPads basically that are cased. And there's an 8-inch, 10-inch, and 13-inch version of that. So go ahead to that next screen, please.
Yeah.
We also have, so anything that we build is called a grid pad. So we make grid software. That's really what we concentrate on. But when we build devices from the ground up and design them with the input of people using AAC and make them extremely durable and with the kind of features that people find most useful, we call them a grid pad. So anything with grid pad means we build it. This is the grid pad 10S is what you see here, which has a forward-facing screen and it's water resistant and antibacterial and all of that. And it's something you could walk around with or have mounted and maybe even use with a switch. But it currently does not work with eye gaze because a 10-inch screen is very small for people to use their eyes to navigate on, point to. So go ahead and we'll show these last couple devices here, which is the grid pad 12 and 15. Now these are much larger and they're designed not just for every form of access that includes using your hands to touch the screen or using a head switch or a head pointer or a switch on your knee or your hand or a gyroscopic switch. They're also there and available to be used with a variety of eye gaze bars. And at Smartbox, we believe that there's not just one solution for everyone. And I'm not sure that anybody actually believes that, but a lot of times when we develop something, we end up kind of getting tunnel vision about what works best. And so you'll notice in our grid software, when we open that up next, that you can use any eye gaze camera with grid. So the idea is that not all eye gaze cameras work best with every set of eyes. And so for some kids, it takes 3 or 4 different tries with different cameras if they're going that route to find the one that works best for them. So we make sure that grid can accept any current eye gaze camera that's on the market.
Mm-hmm. I will say one thing I love about both the grid pad, like all 3 of the grid pads really is that second rear facing screen. I think it's a really unique feature, just be able to keep up that communication with the communication partner instead of having someone stand over your shoulder. You can, they can stand on the opposite side of you and still be able to see what you're communicating. And I love that about it.
It's a good point. And actually, if you hand off the screen to me, Melanie, yeah. I'm going to go ahead and share mine and I'll open up grid. And one of the things that we'll be talking about here in a few minutes is the use of Simojis. And so you should be seeing my grid. Is that correct? Are you seeing that now? Good. So Simojis are something that Melanie will probably talk about in Voco chat is what I'm guessing. But that is a way to express yourself very spontaneously and quickly using a symbol. It's different than just putting a sentence together or saying a message all at once. But that on that front screen is very powerful because it's a way to express what's inside your brain that maybe your body isn't able to show very, very quickly. And it might be funny. It might be sly. It might be, as we said earlier, kind of cheeky and it's in what it's trying to convey. And we'll give examples of that, but it's instant and it's right out in front. So the communication partner doesn't have to come around behind the person to see what they're typing. Okay, so grid as software, which is what we're looking at now. So you saw what the device is that we make that it can ride on, or it could just be on an iPad in your house, or it could be on a Surface Pro in your house. I mean, it's Windows and iOS. So we build devices, but we build the software to work on anything. So this is the software, and the way it's organized is by a user. And this is me as the user here, Chris. And then you have all these things we call grid sets. And a grid set is just a stack of pages. We won't get into today how we do all that. There are lots of ways to learn about that. And we would love to come back and talk to you in more depth about that in the future. But this is kind of like a flying tour of everything. So these grid sets are anything from highly structured and very well thought through, empirically informed language and communication systems. And we're going to dive into two of those today just to give you a sample, but there are many of them included with Grid. You know, Grid just comes with all this stuff, whether you want it or not, and you can quickly get rid of what you don't want, but it's good to know that you have a lot of options with Grid, including, you know, you see Word Power, which is a really nice core-based system. I've added something called the Elves and the Shoemaker, which is just it's a storybook. And you have all these different playful activities to learn how to use AAC that you can easily manipulate and make very, very useful for someone as they learn AAC. And it all just comes with Grid. It's not extra purchasing. It's not anything else. It's just there. So a Grid set is one of these communication tools. I'll just go into one before I show you SuperCore, and that's called Symbol Talker. The only reason I'm showing you this, it's a very traditionally oriented set of symbols, and they're organized by category: food, people, your body, feelings, time. These are categorically oriented symbols so that a person can, because we kind of think in categories sometimes, and it's a way to dive in. Oh, I'm going to get dressed. Well, what am I going to wear today? Do I like it? Do I don't? Okay, so this is a very traditional way that we've been doing AAC for a long time. And it represents one theory on how best a kid can use symbols. There are others represented here, as I mentioned earlier, and what we're going to dive into just as a sample, and I just have to say up front, we're going to ignore a massive amount of what Grid does today. We're just giving you a taste of what it does. But one area, the two major areas that are utilized very frequently with people with Rett are the SuperCore core-based language system and what's called VocoChat, which is fairly newly released. We've been working on it for really years, but is very quickly coming to be very high uptake because it's what we call a pragmatic approach to communication, whereas SuperCore is a core-based approach. They're not mutually exclusive, and Melanie will probably talk to that because I know you always remind me of that whenever we're talking about these things. But so as we're looking at a system like a core-based communication system like SuperCore, first, if you just kind of stare at this for a minute, it looks like a lot of information, and it is, but core-based systems, the idea, the philosophy is you're providing a way for someone who is probably not yet literate or is marginally literate. So they're not using a keyboard to just type their sentences on. Or they're using symbol and word level support because that is the easiest way for them to construct a statement. And so there's a lot of research. Core-based systems have been around for almost 40 years now. And so there's been a lot of research on them, not just in AAC, but in linguistics, in developmental psychology, as I mentioned earlier, in cognitive psychology, and in the education literature. And this particular system, we reviewed really hundreds of articles over the course of a couple of years to pull together what does the empirical research say about how people use these systems? What does our clinical practice say? And what do all these surrounding disciplines contribute to what we know is a good way to organize language, teach people literacy, allow them to communicate quickly about what's important, and have fun. So what we've got here is a screen. You can see that everything in yellow, green, purple, and gray here, these are all core words. And core words are the words that we use 80% of the time when we're talking. We just mix up the order of those words. And then on the right here in blue are categories. And we took these categories straight out of the developmental literature of what people between about 1 and 13 talk about most. The idea is we can scaffold a great deal of communication just by what's on this main screen. I'll show you how it works. So if I wanted to say, I want to play bubbles. I'm going to start here with a pronoun. And by the way, these are color coded by the function of language. And we know this, again, this is, it's called Fitzgerald keyboard design. This has been used for years. It was based on research that was done about 30 years ago on how people learn something new by category best. Category meaning pronouns, articles, verbs. And if we have them color coded, a kid very quickly picks up on a color code and a function of that word. So I want to play, what did I say, bubbles?
I want to.
Now you notice the word play is showing up here in purple, almost like it predicted that.
Play.
Now I'm going to go over here to this category of play. And notice all my core words are still available to me, but I can get into these categories of playing. And I'm given language that I can use in that category
Bubbles.
without losing all of my core. Because we use core all the time to communicate. And it's an amazingly efficient way to teach kids communication and language. Notice too, it says phrases here. And this is a way that we've included the most likely things that kids will say to keep a conversation going. Something that kids who use AAC don't do very well is what we call conversational turns. They don't turn back the conversation back and forth, back and forth. That's what we do all the time. We meet someone on the street and we talk about the coffee we had in the morning. It'll go back and forth 5, 8 times with a conversation. So this is a way to provide a way to model and a way for that kid to keep the conversation going.
That's mine.
Okay. Now, I'm going to jump home again here real quick to get back to these main categories. And just to show you one more time, I want to play. And you'll notice something important that's throughout SuperCore, which is that the word play is going to show up here because it's the next most likely word to occur in English. And it's always going to show up in exactly the same place on the screen. That's really important because one of the things that we found over the years is that if a kid has to keep looking for where a word is and it appears in a different place on different screens all the time, that takes up a ton of attention. It's very frustrating. It is cognitively difficult for a person who's already got some cognitive challenges and they're struggling with attention and organization already. So if we know that the word play is always going to show up right here, our eyes are going to move there, our hand is going to move there, our head switch or whatever is going to look for that in that space before we even know what we're looking about. And so our idea is we want a kid to think about what they're going to say, not how they're going to say it. And that takes a lot of thinking out of the equation that we wouldn't do if that person was using their natural speech to communicate. They just say what they're thinking. They don't think, we don't think, I'm going to send a motor package from my motor strip to make my articulators move a certain way to make the T sound, to say the word tea. We don't think that. We just say, I'm thirsty. It's 10 in the morning. A cup of tea sounds amazing. Who wants some tea? So we want the kids using alternative access to language and communication to not have to think about how things are happening. So I'll start that sentence one more time.
I want to.
And there's the word play. So if I had been practicing this 8 or 10 times with someone, I absolutely guarantee, because I've done this clinically, they will move toward where that word is going to show up before it shows up. And it's because they know it's going to be there. And I'll give one last example of that before I kind of switch gears a little bit on this. But if I were to go to another kind of one of these topic areas over here. So here's the core, here are these topics, and I say places. Now, every time you see a plus sign on a key in SuperCore, it means not all the words in that category can fit in these two little columns. And it means we're going to leave this core area and go to a list of words. Okay, so I'm going to say more. And then let's use the example of buildings. And what you're going to notice is there's all these words. It just looks like a lot of words. And you'll notice they're not oriented alphabetically. as frequently we do in AAC. But for people who are learning core, they're using core because they're not literate. And we know from the literature that people who are not yet literate are very confused by something that is alphabetical, which of course makes sense. So instead, we've set these up so they're in columns that have a semantic relationship. So you'll see firehouse, police station, hospital, doctor's office, dentist. These are all semantically related words. And the reason is that that's how we think about words before we're literate. And it also enables us to put words in the same place over and over again on the screen. So firehouse, for instance, and at school recently, I was doing a training with a family and clinicians at a school district, and the fire department had been there earlier in the day, and all the kids were running around with helmets and little red helmets and pretending they were putting out a fire. It was great. So in this case, here's firehouse. Now, if I go to people, notice that was a plus sign, so it bounced me into lots of people and jobs. You'll notice that firefighter is in exactly the same place on the screen as firehouse was.
Firefighter.
So not only did we have the firehouse right here up center, but so is firefighter. So we have semantic relationship that occurs up and down in column. And if I were to go into vehicles, which I'm not going to take the time to do because there's other things we want to talk about, I guarantee that if I went to vehicles, that fire truck would be right here. So there's a semantic relationship across grid sets between where the words occur on the screen. And that, again, we want to release kids from having to learn where something is, and we want to enable them to be thinking about what they're talking about or what the subject matter is, and they'll just go there in that general vicinity on the screen and be able to find the vocabulary that they need. So just that's an example of how we considered what's important as we continue to evolve our thinking about how we should organize core and make it available to people. Two last things I'll mention about this grid set, and then we'll move on to VocoChat. One is, how do we get people to literacy? If our goal is that we want to always try to support or scaffold word learning, letter shape learning, sound associations, there's a few ways to do that again, we're pointed to empirically. One, you'll notice that some of the words depicted in core are combined with a symbol, like the word want has this little person reaching out for something, and stop has the iconic stop sign next to it. Go has the commonly used green arrow. But then these articles here like to and is or the little connector words. And the reason there's no symbol there is because these things have been studied. And we know that actually if you combine a symbol with the word to, which is very opaque in its meaning, it's a function word. Well, you put a symbol next to it, and what you really end up with is a symbol next to a symbol, because a squiggly hook line with a cross on it and a circle means to, but then if you put some abstract symbol next to that, it's a symbol and a symbol. So a kid will learn the word to visually faster than if it's combined with a symbol. And we know this from the literature. So anytime that has been shown to be the case, we leave the symbol off. So that's one way. They also get the advantage of learning what a word shape is. And we can say, oh, that's a word. You always say it's the toy, or it's the fire truck. And then we also have a variety of keyboards, which contributes to literacy behavior. And these are all like the word bat and cat here. So we'll use that as an example. When I model this keyboard and I come in here and I say, okay, Melanie, let's spell the word cat. And cat has three sounds, ka, a, ta. And that first part is with the letter C. So let's press the C or look at the C or however the kid is using it. And when that is pressed, you probably can't hear it, but grid gives the phonetic k sound because initial C makes that noise. Then I get the vowel sound a, and then t. So it has just given me the phonetic correlate for those sounds. And then it's shown me the symbol for cat. I can
Cat.
speak it. So there's lots of reinforcement as a modeler and as a teacher for this person. And then if you're me and you never remember where anything is in any grid set, I can use the find word button here and say, well, let's find out how to say cat. And then what grid does is it will give this little pathway and it can say, see, we're going to go to topics, animals, that makes sense, pets, and there's the word cat. Okay, now let's see if we can find that again. And then we can go back and try to find that with the person. So I'm going to kind of wrap things up here by just saying SuperCore is a system. It was systematically studied. It was systematically put together, and it was intentionally set up for language learning and literacy. And that's really why it exists. It is very effectively used by kids diagnosed with Rett all over the world right now. It's been translated into many languages. So for those of you that are multilingual, we have Spanish, French, we have German, Russian. There's I don't remember how many languages this is translated into now, and they all have proper grammar and the rest of it because we've paid attention to that.
Wand.
The magic wand here, which you may be wondering what on earth that is, that just allows us to go in and change a word form or the tense.
Wanted.
Because we are teaching grammar and we're teaching, well, that happened in the past. You wanted to play bubbles. Well, here, I'll show you how to say that happened before. You're not talking about now, you're talking about last week. So that's wanted. So we're going to make that a different word. Anyway, I'm not going to go into detail on that. Just know that that is capable. So I'm going to bounce out of SuperCore. And Melanie, before we go to VocaChat, let me just say that for some people, SuperCore 50 is a lot. Or maybe a person using their eyes to select finds 50 buttons hard because they're smaller on the screen. So we have SuperCore 30. And then finally on this, for people learning SuperCore or core at all, we provide these learning grids. Like for instance, play, and here's bubbles again. And this is a very stark and very easy way that I could with a family say, you know what, we're learning some core. We're aiming for this core use. Here's a way to just have an activity like bubbles. And in fact, you could just maybe go print this because then it's portable. You can just carry it around the room and model with this person the different symbols that are going to be used, or maybe their siblings can use this while they're playing to show that that they can, play too and ask for things and keep the conversation going. And by the way, if you really wanted to, you could say, you know what, this is still too much. We're not going to talk about big, little, and up here. Let's just either delete these or let's just hide these so that there's even less information on here. And we can make this that much easier for the person to use without getting distracted. I can always unhide them later, by the way, but that gets into more of the editing that we can talk about it at a different time. But I want to make sure we have time for you to see something very different, which Melanie, I'll let you talk about VocaChat because that's just a totally different kind of system. I'm going to stop sharing for a minute so you can share your screen.
Sounds good. So you should be able to see VocaChat, hopefully. Perfect. I see head nods. I love it. So as Chris was mentioning, VocaChat is something completely different. While SuperCore is really based around core words, VocaChat is based more around pragmatic, or why are we trying to communicate? And we really got a lot of feedback from users and SLPs and caregivers saying, we love core is amazing, but there are times where it's a bit too much for someone. And so we need something a little bit different. And so we took more of an approach of saying, we want to be able to make it very easy, very functional to be able to communicate very quickly. And the goal is to get our meaning across. And so we may not have all the grammatically correct words in order and everything like that, but we can really get our point across. And as I think of myself when I, communicate, there are times that I write very beautiful letters or emails, and everything's grammatically correct. And then there are times where I want to just get my point across, and I might shorten things or, use phrases or different things like that. And it's different. And so it has different approaches. Neither one is bad nor good. They're just different means of communicating the same thing. And so really what Vocal Chat does is it says, what are the reasons that people communicate? We communicate to express our wants, to be able to tell stories, to ask questions, to talk about our feelings, to advocate for ourselves, to tell about our thoughts. And so we really wanted to incorporate that and give a more scaffolded approach, more support to be able to communicate those things. And so as we're kind of going through, you'll notice that we hit a lot of those reasons that people want to communicate. So what we have is these 6 communication pathways that we can work through to be able to communicate what we want. So if we start and we click on something is wrong, that for some people that may be enough. That's maybe they can only press one button, or only they're just learning how to use things and they aren't able to put a lot of buttons together. They can start with that, and it's enough to get their communication partner's attention so that that communication partner can help them build the meaning together. Or they can continue on and start to figure out, add some more details. So something's wrong with my body. And maybe something itches and it's my foot. So now I've gotten very, very detailed. I've gotten my point across. Hey, my foot really itches. Not necessarily grammatically correct, but it gets that point across. And so very, very clear communication. And then if I were to go back home and maybe now I want to communicate something different, and I click on a new communication pathway, it automatically clears out the text box up top. And again, that scaffolded approach, we want to make it a little bit easier for that person using the device to be able to communicate what they want. So we just cleared that out for them. So now they can talk about things. They can talk about their news, or they can tell jokes, talk about themselves. And I love this, where they can put these different things in about themselves. And then they can also, I want to tell you about someone else. So having that ability to not only talk about myself, but the people around me as well. And then we have asking questions.
Can I ask you something?
So we can ask questions and about what we're doing, where we're going, all of those different things that we might want to be able to communicate as far as asking some additional questions. And then
Can I mention one thing in there too,
please.
Melanie, that I love about this? If you go back to, can I ask you something, and then more?
Can I ask you something?
Yes.
So the question why and how, or why not and how much, these are very underrepresented concepts that we see when we analyze how people use AAC. So kids learning AAC do well in certain areas, and sometimes they're up to grade level, or they're up to the developmental grade that we would expect. And then a lot of kids seem to lag in certain areas. They lag in conceptual thinking. They lag in positional awareness, describing, on top of, underneath, around, behind. And it's not because they aren't capable. It's that they don't have the language to learn, because language is both what we teach people and it's experimentation. So providing these opportunities, and this is what I wanted to mention, is, for a kid to hit why, or for us to model the use of the question why, is awesome for people who use AAC, because they don't get a lot of that on their own. So anyway, just wanted to mention that while we're there.
And someone had asked, is VocaChat a different software program from Grid? It's actually just another Grid set. So it's available right within Grid. So you can actually choose SuperCore, you can choose VocaChat, you can choose Symbol Talker, which Chris looked at the beginning. All of those come within Grid. Then we also have being able to request. Maybe they want to do something. Do some cooking, and then it actually takes to an activity grid where you can be able to talk about that activity. So I want to put in the ingredients, or I want to choose the recipe. So having a couple verbs, and then also being able to add in some words around that, so you can interact about that activity that you're doing. Then we have feeling words. And then we also have this I'm not okay. And I'm going to get into this a little bit later. We actually have two ways to get to this. We can get to it through the feelings, and we can also get to it through a toolkit that we'll look at shortly. But it's a really nice feature to be able to express even deeper about why you're feeling what you're feeling. And we'll get into that in just a minute. Then we also have the I think. So we can talk about how things taste or feel. We can rate things. So we have a couple different rating scales. And again, if it's something that maybe there's too many rating scales, maybe we don't want as much of this rating scale, we can edit these. We can hide different ones so that you can make it whatever is needed for that individual, or what works best for them. So besides our 6 message pathways, we also have a whole bunch of what are kind of quick communication. We know core words are really important. And while VocaChat is more pragmatic based, we don't lose core words. We have lots of them already built in. So if you go into quick words, you'll notice a lot of the similar core words from in SuperCore to be able to get a lot of those things across really quickly. We also have the ability to keep up that communication and carry on a conversation. Like Chris was talking about before, being able to start a conversation, but then also keeping it going. Can I show you something, or tell me more, and kind of moving that conversation along. Being able to fix communication breakdowns, and then also to be able to end a conversation. And then we also have my phrases, and I'm just going to go in here just briefly, because we also want to show a little bit about editing. We're not going to get in super deep, but just to be able to show that you can add things in here. So we can add in a quick, I'm trying to think about what I'd want to add. How about I'm hungry, because I'm thinking about food. Like I said, it's a little bit later here. So I can add in what the cell label is going to be. I can find a picture. They have some along the top. Oh, I like that one. But if I don't like that, I could find a search online. I can use my camera to take pictures on the device. There's lots of different options, but I'm just going to use that one. And so now I have that in there. Very easy. I can change the shape of the button if I wanted to. I can change the color. I can move things around if I want to. I can make buttons bigger or smaller based on the person's need. So there's really a lot you can do to customize any of these grid sets and make them really work for that individual. And we actually encourage that. You may notice as we go through, especially on this page, there's not a lot on that page. And we did that for a reason, because we want you to customize it. We could put in tons of phrases, but those might not be the phrases that are most important to that individual. So we want you to customize it and what works for them. And then this last column here is just all the other words. So we have additional people. You can talk about places that they want to go to. And then all of, the food, the clothing, all of those different things, along with action words and describing words. Then we also have my toolkit. And these are some of the things I think kind of make vocal chat stand apart, is that you have the ability to talk to yourself. The first thing that
I'm
you do when
talking
you
to
press
myself.
that button, it actually says, I am talking to myself. So your communication partner knows the next thing that you hear is not meant for you. It's to myself. I think it's really important that we give people the ability to talk to themselves and work through things, and have that opportunity. We also have calming
Calming
down,
down.
either ways to communicate what they need or to give themselves that cue about what they may want to do. And then we have that I'm not okay, which we talked
I'm
about
not
a little bit
okay.
before. And I really love this page in that it gives people really the ability to advocate and to talk about those hard things. We know people that use communication devices or have communication difficulties are at higher risk for mental health challenges, and they need the words to be able to talk about that. And for a child to be able to
Something
talk
happened.
about, I'm not okay, something happened, I don't have anyone to play with, or I had an argument. It's really important to be able to talk about those things or what they're worried about, and having the words for that. So I think that's something really unique about vocal chat, along with all the other different things that are in here as far as keyboards, the ability to put pictures in here, all of those things. Yeah, and someone said my daughter talks to herself a lot. I do too. So I think it's really important to have that option. One other thing that Chris kind of alluded to in SuperCore, and I wanted to point out in here, with that second screen, we have this grid set called Smoji. It's actually built into SuperCore. It's also built into vocal chat. And it is a great little feature that has animations that can express a lot without having to type any words at all. As we think about how much we communicate with emojis, emojis are very similar to that. And if you do have a device with the second screen that we kind of showed earlier, these will show up on there. They can have sound or you can turn it off. But just such a fun, great way to be able to add in lots of fun things. Kids love these, love to be able to, add something funny. And it's really great to be able to express that personality that sometimes can get missed, because with text and different things like that, you can express a lot through these. So I love these a lot, and I like to make sure that we show that on here as well.
Emojis have been one of the most
Love these.
beloved additions to Grid in recent memory. And I think the reason why, and I have a background in developmental psychology, so I'll always defer to my past, academic interest when I talk about these things. But, again, and a dear friend of mine was born with cerebral palsy, and there are aspects of his inner life, his inner psychology, his inner just observations that I still don't have good access to because it's very difficult to read his body language. And yet when he uses an emoji on a text message, I know exactly where his head is at that moment. And I think that's the value of the emojis for people using AAC, and particularly if their body doesn't always reveal exactly what's in their head. And, Melanie was saying, well, if it's on the forward facing display. So imagine, Trish walks into the room and Melanie is there, and Melanie and I are having a little conversation about what she's going to have for lunch and what kind of yogurt she wants or whatever. Trish walks in and Trish just gives a little sidelong glance or rolls her eyes, goes, there's Chris again, trying to make you choose what, type of yogurt you want. Melanie could have a little Smoji interaction with Trish that just shows what she's actually thinking on the front screen, and it would involve nothing, and it wouldn't interrupt the words that we were putting together that I was modeling on her device either. But it would let Trish know kind of where her head is. So these are examples. And I guess the last part of that is what we've alluded to several times today, which is this modeling. It gives us this chance to teach a kid how to express themselves this way too, because they're not going to learn it very easily just by being in the environment. They will to a degree, but really being able to use it and knowing that they're empowered to be able to express themselves this way is extremely important. And so, yeah, I think it's why people have enjoyed this so much. And we get a lot of folks who are with an acquired disease later in life who are using Simojis all the time as well. And they say they do for the reasons I've just mentioned. It's because people can't interpret what they're thinking and they want to be able to express that still.
Yeah. So, and I just wanted to show you that that was in SuperCore. It's also in the magic wand, and it's right here in this little corner. So just to show you that it's in both of those. So that was a very whirlwind tour.
Whew, yeah.
As quick as we could do it. What questions do people have? Someone said, if we have two devices, eye gaze device and a portable device, and a staff makes changes on one page or page, can it get synced easily?
Yes. So there's a couple things with Grid. One is that if you have a Grid account, meaning your Grid account is stored in the cloud, then the devices that you have that are registered into that user. So if I've got, Melanie Gylling on one machine and Melanie Gylling on another machine, and she's on Wi-Fi, then when changes are made to one, they'll sync in the cloud. And that's really convenient. The other thing is that Grid has what's called remote editing capability. So that if Melanie decided to approve me as a remote editor, I could be anywhere. I could be having a glass of wine at 9 p.m, watching a soccer match when the Portland Timbers are playing the Vancouver team, but we won't get into that right now. But I could be, probably crying into my wine at that point. But the point is, I could be editing Melanie's Grid sets and make those changes for her without having to be there. And then when I say save, as soon as she's on Wi-Fi, it would sync with those changes, and we would have them sync. So yeah, so there's lots of different ways for that to happen.
Right. Someone else asked, if you already have SuperCore 50, can you get the Simojis without losing all your customizations? Yes. If you haven't been using SuperCore, if you download a new version of it, it will automatically have it in there. If you have been using SuperCore for a while and you want Simoji, you can just download Simoji and then make a jump to it. And that's a really easy thing to do. Something that our support team or myself or Chris can show you how to do.
Yep. And to take that even one step further, there is a way to update some of the language and this like Simoji functionality and everything in SuperCore without even downloading it and making a link. You can kind of feather it in, but that's probably easiest to do with the help of our support team. And that's just a matter of calling in. They can remote into the device from where they are and help get that updated properly. So any questions about that, just shoot us an email or contact support through our website or at thinksmartbox.com.
And I'm just writing both mine and Chris's emails in the chat here too.
I guess the last thing that's probably worth mentioning while we come to a close is just to say that this was whirlwind tour. And so for those of you, either if you watch this as a recording or for those of you that are on with us today and know people or yourself would like to have a more in-depth discussion, or maybe you have specific questions about either your child or a child or how things are configured, we're available to just hop on a Zoom call anytime to work with you on that. Or get our support team involved who do that all day. That's their job, is that they support people using Grid worldwide and make it functional for them and solve technical problems and help with content and all that. So just know that we're available for that.
And is SuperCore an upgrade that needs to be purchased? No.
No.
If you have Grid, either Grid 3 or Grid for iPad, it's on there. It's just part of the software.
And if you have trouble finding it or need to know how to download it into Grid as an update, let us know and we'll talk you through that too. Great. Well, if there are no other major questions, we're thrilled to have been here. And
Thank you so much.
yeah, just look forward to any interaction we have in the future. Any questions, just keep them coming.
Thank you so much, Melanie and Chris, for all your efforts today. Just to wrap a few things up, I would like to thank the associations across Canada that have joined together to put this event on. This event plus the other web series that have happened and are coming up. The following associations are all involved: the Rett Syndrome Society of British Columbia, Rett Syndrome Society of Alberta, Manitoba Rett Syndrome Association, Saskatchewan Rett Syndrome Association, and the Ontario Rett Syndrome Association. So thank you so much for all that they have done to organize and fund this. We also, if you have more questions, feel free to email, I'm sure, Chris and Melanie, if you have more questions.
Anytime.
And yeah, with that, I'd like to thank you guys for your time and efforts today. Thank you.
You bet. Take care and we'll be in touch.
Have a wonderful day, you guys.
Yep, will
Thank
do.
you.